Good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you tonight at the French Institute in the United Kingdom. I'm Anicia Morel, the director of this institute. And we join you at the Ciné Lumière tonight, having just concluded a ceremony during which our deputy head of mission, Sébastien Bidot, made Edmund de Waal Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et Lettres. And to explain it, it is the equivalent of a knighthood, the highest distinction that France reserves to persons who have distinguished themselves by their creativity in the field of art, culture, and literature, or for their contribution to the influence of arts in France and throughout the world. And we couldn't think of a more deserving artist to bestow it upon, and we thank you for your friendship to our country. Dear Edmund de Waal, we're very grateful that in your new persona as Knight of Arts and Letters, you're sharing your thoughts and vision with our audience. And we're also grateful to Olivier Gabet, Director of the Art Department of the Louvre Museum, for engaging in a conversation that will no doubt dwell on an already fruitful collaboration. You all know Edmund de Waal and Olivier Gabet, but a short introduction wouldn't go amiss. So, dear Edmund, you're an internationally acclaimed artist and writer. You created visual sculptural interventions that have transformed the way we understand and look at artifacts. Your large-scale installations are often created in response to collections and archives, or to the history of a particular place, the British Museum, the V&A, Watsden Manor here in the UK, the Frick Collection in New York, the Ateneo Veneto in Venice, Schindler House in Los Angeles, and I could go on and on. But ultimately, I have to mention the Musée Nissim de Camondo in Paris. You're also a writer, and your family memoir, The Hare with Amber Eyes, captivated the public. And in 2021, you published Letters to Camondo, a series of imagined and rather haunting letters to the collector Moïse de Camondo. We'll come back to them. That same year, in 2021, you were made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and awarded a CBE for your services to art. In 2023, you have received the Isamu Noguchi Award for your contribution as both a writer and artist. Dear Olivier, you're a museum curator, a conservateur général du patrimoine. You're a graduate of both École des Chartes and the École nationale du patrimoine. To those of you who don't know the École des Chartes, it basically means that Olivier can decipher medieval manuscript and speak Latin. You started your career at the Musée d'Art Moderne de Paris. In 2005, you joined the Musée d'Orsay to oversee their decorative arts collection. And from 2008, you embarked on a more adventurous path to create the Louvre Abu Dhabi. You became head of decorative arts and deputy scientific director of the agence which coordinated the loans and created the project itself. In 2013, you became a director of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs and then its deputy chief executive, and your tenure was marked by major exhibitions, notably Christian Dior, and its success was such that the queues often blocked the traffic on Rue de Rivoli, which is no small achievement. But in this role, you were also responsible for the Musée Nissim de Camondo. It was around and for the Musée Camondo that you and Edmund de Waal met and that your close friendship developed. Edmund was the first contemporary artist you invited to the Musée Camondo. The book, Lettres à Camondo, followed, as did the exhibition. But I've spoken too much already. So, dear Edmund de Waal, in literature and in art, you explore the themes of diaspora, exile, memory, and of appearing and disappearing. And it is time we explore these golden threads with you.
Ça, c'est bon. I have no PowerPoint, but Edmund prepared a PowerPoint, so don't worry, you will have a lot of image to be very alive. It's a great honor to be here tonight and to be with Edmund another time. We did it several times, and we try always to do something new each. But for sure, the first time to be in London, it's something very special. So I'm sure it will be a very special moment. Before entering into because we're thinking about this little conversation and this big honor bestowed to Edmund tonight, it makes sense to talk about this relationship with around the beautiful book Letters to Camondo and to the exhibition, the subsequent exhibition. So we thought that it was interesting to focus on this. And my first question, because there is always a first question, and you will be allowed later to ask your own question. My first question to Edmund will be, what was your first relationship with France? And as we are here almost in a French territory, what's your feeling about France? And you have to be honest and transparent.
So I thank you so much all for coming. I'm hugely honoured and gratified and surprised. And thank goodness I'm sitting down, because I'm really shaking still from receiving this great honour, and also from this great joy of sharing an evening with you, Olivier, and with you all tonight. And what was your question again? It was about France, wasn't it? And actually, I think my first memory of France is being in the back of a VW Dormobile with all my brothers and my mother and my father trying to get across France in the 70s, and having good food for the first time in my childhood. So I mean, I suspect that's my first encounter with France. And it's a long relation. I'm very old. I mean, it's a long-standing relationship with France, which has, had moments of real complexity, which we will get to, I suspect, this evening. If we have a lock-in here, as we say in London, yeah.
And to be a little bit more specific, during the beautiful speech that you were given for this honor, we talk about Mallarmé and some other French writer. What about French art and French literature? Because you are both an artist and a writer, which is not that usual in a way, even today.
Well, I mean, I could start by showing a little bit of the story, which might indicate some of that. I mean, when you say art, of course, for me, it's not just Renoir and Degas and Manet. It is Sèvres. It's Gautier. It's the French decorative arts as much as it is as the great Impressionists. It's Chardin forever. Deeply. If I could take one thing from the Louvre, you're now running the Louvre, for God's sake. If I could take one of the pictures, it would be
the boss of the Louvre, which makes me very comfortable. I will send the request to Laurence Descartes as a president.
But it would be Chardin, and for that extraordinary, ferocious attention to how a glass of water might sit next to a loaf of bread, or how 5 plums, have been there for 2 days and they're just going over and the bloom of the plums is just there. And that kind of attention to, how one particular kind of porcelain coffee pot can sit on a table has been hugely significant for me for how I think about the presence of objects in space. So it's Chardin forever. It's Mallarmé for finding white space on a page, which allows me to think about making huge white vitrines where very few objects can sit. So Mallarmé, it's Proust that takes me down the Rue de Monceau and into all those houses and makes, how long have we got? Quite a lot.
You say about Rue de Monceau?
Yeah, I mean...
And to enter into, what was the first time you ever went to the Musée Nissim de Camondo?
Well, the first time was in my 20s. I knew about it, of course, because, And my grandmother Elizabeth, I knew she had been to when it wasn't a museum, when it was a family house, to see cousins in Paris. She talked to me both about her Viennese childhood, but also very, very passionately. This is my father's mother. My father is in the audience tonight. He's grew up in Paris. And my grandmother Elizabeth de Frissy moved to Paris in the early 1920s. I think for a love affair. But more of that later, possibly another book, possibly. And she was a writer there, and then eventually she married a Dutchman and brought her young family to Paris. And that's when the musée, the house, the Camondo, was present. I remember going when I was in my early 20s, and it being incredibly melancholy, very, very sad place. There was no one there. I mean, this is an experience that you will, way back, you'll remember, that it was a place that had fallen asleep in some ways, but not in a benevolent way. It had fallen asleep in a sort of liminal way, in a sort of threshold kind of way, where you weren't quite sure what was there, and you weren't quite sure if the people who were sort of sitting on the stools wanted you to be there at all. Does that ring a bell?
That rings a bell. And for people who know the Musée Camondo, what's quite interesting is that actually it's very interesting to say, because it's quite recently that the place changed from a museum back to a house. And I have to pay homage to one of my predecessors, Marianne Le Gary, who really restores the bathroom, restores the kitchen. And I would say today that, perhaps at your time, people were used to go to see paintings and furniture, 18th century. I guess that today, as my experience as a former director, people go to see and to visit a house of the turn of the century, which is great difference. I'm sure you perhaps feel more alive if you have come with this experience. But you are totally right sometimes. But what I love at the Musée de Camondo is that for a long time, when you enter into the room, and if one of the security person is sit down, he get up.
Yes.
Which is very rare. And which is love the way that you are welcome into a house, a family house still.
I mean, it's in a very extraordinary place. And I mean, just to briefly, I mean, the reason I went back to the Rue de Monceau is because I started on this ridiculous quest, telling my wife, Sue, who's in the audience, that it would all blow over in 6 months. And it took me about 6 years to write this book about my family, which became The Hair with Amber Eyes. But when I began the journey of that, I was in the Rue de Monceau, and I found the first house of the Frissy, my Odessan Jewish financier family, and found that up the Rue de Monceau, this is where the first family had lived and built this house, and where Charles Frissy, this extraordinary collector, who I think was the last person to get in the family to get this award. I think this might be.
He was officer of the Légion d'honneur. If I trust totally this portrait.
There he is.
He's
wearing his red, and hello. And you may know the story that he was a great collector and collected not only kind of ridiculous Medici embroideries. This is his bed where he unpicked M for Medici and put E for a Frissy, which tells you about my Parisian family, but collected this extraordinary collection that came down to me, this of Netscape, but also, this amazing collection that he hangs on the walls of the Rue de Monceau. All of these things, we have none of them. They're all in wonderful museums. And here he is at the back of the luncheon of the boating party in his top hat, and here is this wonderful collection of asparagus that very kindly was mentioned in the speech just a minute ago. Where it was meant to be 800 francs. He sends 1,000, and then this arrives in the Rue de Monceau, on the Tuesday afterwards with a little note saying this is slipped from the bundle, which takes you into Proust, because one of the people going up that staircase in the Rue de Monceau is Proust, Charles Frissy's first secretary. So Proust inhabits the book, inhabits Paris for me, and makes my life immeasurably more complicated when trying to write a book. It's also incredibly embarrassing to talk about Proust surrounded by French people, because
there is only French people in the audience, I'm sure.
But
As you remember, we show you at the archive of the Musée Camondo. We have a letter by they have. No, I have to forget we. They have a letter by Proust after a mourning letter after the death of Nissim. We never met. And he sent a beautiful letter to his father, like he was his best friend, very much like in a Proustian way.
It's extraordinary. So, you know, here in this extraordinary, beautiful house, which is 10 houses down from the Frissy mansion in the Rue de Monceau, this is the house. This is the house that Moïse de Camondo, here he is, this great financier family that came, Jewish family that came from Constantinople, arrives, he marries this very beautiful, this is the wonderful portrait of Irène, who he marries when she's 21, a portrait that Charles Frissy enables to be married. And then he builds this incredible mansion. And it really is extraordinary, isn't it? This is the house of someone of impeccable taste who has become Parisian and wants to make a house in which, you know, I think we agree on this. You know, this is a house where he can imagine any Enlightenment writer, a novelist, a painter of the 18th century could come round his dinner table and be part of civilized Parisian society. But what you did, which was extraordinary, because I knew all that bit, was to allow me to go up this bit. You opened the door, Olivier, and you took me up to the attics. And in the attics of the Musée Camondo are extraordinary room after room after room. You open a cupboard and it has trunks from the 1930s. You open another one and it's got light fittings from the 1920s. Another one is full of sort of Louis XV furniture. There's an amazing archive of letters, of menus, of correspondence with so many people, and Proust. And it's all up there. And photographs, family photographs. Here is Moïse de Camondo with his son Nissim, who dies in the war. And this whole story of how this house, this extraordinary house, comes from being a celebratory house to being a house of mourning. Because when Nissim dies in the First War, Moïse decides to make it a memorial. And so this is his bedroom.
You have to know that what was fascinating with this experience with Edmund is that you are always happy to show the behind the scene of a place. But what was very amazing and quite striking for the team, there is a small curatorial team in Camondo, there's the fact that Edmund wanted to have access to all archives, which is not the usual request of someone you invite to this kind of place. You want to see some special place, we went on the roof, we were everywhere, but to see the archives for hours and days, it's quite special.
It was wonderful, and actually I have a wonderful memory, and I have a picture which I should show tonight really, which is you disappearing out of a window onto a balustrade, saying, "Come on, come on, come on." And actually it was the experience of discovering a house, which is really a house where it's built around, the experience of the house became more and more complicated, that it wasn't just a house of incredible French furniture, incredible French pictures of Gobelin tapestries, but it was a house, it was a family house. And at the heart of the family house was one secret wrapped in another, in another, in another. Because in the heart of the house was the story that Camondo's daughter had married this Frissy cousin who was a composer. And here she is. And then when the house was given over to France in 1936, 1937, 38.
The will is signed by Moïse de Camondo in 35, and it's become a museum after his death in 36.
So this extraordinary thing that this family house is given to France on his death, with the extraordinary heart of this, the proviso that nothing must be moved, nothing must be changed, nothing must be brought in. So what he's doing, and this is what we've talked about over the years, and it's incredibly difficult and interesting thing, is that what he is doing is saying, I'm giving this house, this artifact, this idea of Frenchness to the French state as a sort of marker of my family into the future. It's a gift because he's grateful for his French citizenship, for his family. It's a gratitude to Paris, for becoming Parisian. And so it becomes a museum with that as the proviso, and his daughter and son-in-law and their children, move to another grander part of Paris, and they leave it behind.
And you're right to underline, Edmund, that Béatrice de Camondo, the wife of Léon Reinhardt, was crucial because she was, her brother died, so obviously she had to give a kind, in the French law, you don't do whatever you want with your money, which is very French, already at that time. So she had to give a kind of permission to her father to do so, because she was heir of the place and the fortune and the collection. And she realized that her father was totally attached, was totally into transforming it into a memorial. And it's a very beautiful gesture of love from his daughter to say at one point, it's what you want, I will do everything you want to make it possible. And that's very important because you see it's family house. We remember we went to the bathroom. I mean, we don't realize because she married and she left the house, but for a long time she grew up in this house. And as you perhaps say, I don't remember, but I don't say, Moïse divorced. I mean, his wife left him. At that time, in the early 1910s, to do that was not that usual. And the family was very shocked, and the children decided to stay with their father. So Béatrice grew up in this house, We saw her bathroom, we saw her garde-robe, etc. So for her, it was not like it's not a memorial for her. It was her childhood and teenage years.
It's so interesting because you have this is the thing about reading objects and reading houses, is that there's no singular narrative. I mean, everyone, everyone has such a profoundly different experience of space, let alone the objects within the space. And so being in that house where the collection has been put together by this incredible collector, where everything has been placed like an installation, one thing next to another, like a jardin, this particular object is going to work in this particular energy if I put it here. Oh no, hang on, I'm going to buy another one. Move everything around. And try again. But then you have the children growing up, and you kind of, and Béatrice growing up, and you imagine her and her children. You imagine the sounds of this house. You imagine the sounds, the secret sounds of all the servants' staircases, of people moving around, or of children running, or of the piano being played by her husband, Léon Reinhardt. And so you have to animate it in that way. And as you do so, what became clear with the time that we spent in those archives, that in this extraordinary house, the presence of what happened next was there, but you could almost barely hear it. For me, it was very, very similar to being in Vienna, in our old family house on the Ringstrasse, where you wanted to sort of spend more and more and more time just to try and pick up on what survives, and when you look at the pictures of the family, this is them, during the war, and then the gradual, what happens, that this Jewish family, this is the archive. This is the thing that matters. Is that they are all four of the family, Béatrice and Léon and their two children, are rounded up and interned in Drancy, the Parisian concentration camp, guarded by Parisian policemen, and when you see these things, this is the archive that really matters. You can wade through all the things. But when you come across these, this is pretty extraordinary and heartbreaking, because all four of them were deported to Auschwitz and murdered. And this is the last picture we have of Bertrand with his puppy. And this is the young Camondo boy who was training to be a cabinet maker. He wanted to be a cabinet maker. He'd grown up in the house, the only place in Paris where you could run your hands over the most incredible cabinets that have ever been made. And he decides that he wants to become a cabinet maker, and he is murdered in Auschwitz. So, what do you do? We have this time in the archives. We look here, and there's this invitation from this man who says, would you do something in this family house? Would you, and part of the heartbreaking complexity of this is that the will of Moïse de Camondo says nothing must be moved. And so,
you see, it was the first time. It was also the last time, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I remember when some journalists came to see the exhibition the first time, they say, what will be next? Because in every single museum today, you do once, and so the next year at the same date, you do another one. And it was the first time I think that they heard me, saying, oh, perhaps there will be no other time. Oh, really? I say, no, because it's Edmund, and I'm not sure that we will do it again.
So he's just said this in front of all of you, and you can bear witness to this. But what happened next was very kind of powerful part of our friendship, because we were supposed to have thought our way into the exhibition, and then there was the pandemic. And I found myself in my studio with normally I have a wonderful team of people there, and I was completely by myself. And I found myself writing letters to Moïse de Camondo. I started writing to him. I started writing about families and jardin and food and dust and all kinds of things, and staircases and Proust, and I just started writing to him, and he became more and more present for me as a real interlocutor, someone I was really talking to. So at a certain point, I wrote to you and said, I'm really sorry, but I've written a book.
I remember, we all went through the pandemic, and it was a harsh experience for every of us. For a museum director, it was quite difficult, because from a day to another, you close your museum, you just open some exhibitions, they are closed. You have your team. I had a pretty big team. You realize what is the real life of the people. Sometimes, lonely woman with kids, alone in a small apartment and so on. So you do that, and so you forget a bit the other topics and project and exhibition. I remember one day and I have to say, because we can share it to the audience, when you were the director, I think that my successor decided to not do that. Since Moïse de Camondo, the director of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, has a privilege to live in Camondo, not in the house, of course, it's the domestic wing. It's in this will, he says that. The chief curator could be in the house, but not in the main house nearby. So I had this privilege to spend the pandemic 2.5 months there with my companion on our dog.
A wonderful dog.
Yeah.
A wonderful companion, and a wonderful dog.
He will appreciate. And so, you are really in the middle of this incredible moment for everyone. And at one point, I remember someone told me, and what happened? And what about the project with Edmund de Waal? And I say, I have no news from Edmund, but we had news from friends, and people during that time. It was quite harsh. And one day, this gentleman sent me a texto or an email, say, could we talk together soon? I said, let's call. And you told me, I have news for you. I don't know about the exhibition, but I wrote a book. And you sent me the manuscript. I have to say that it was quite, in this loneliness of the pandemic, to receive these letters was not voyeuristic, like entering into a relationship, but like something which was very much alive in this moment of, death, sadness, quietness also. And that's everything happened. But I really insist to do an exhibition also.
Well, I mean, it was interesting because the experience of writing to Moïse made the exhibition happen. Because I was trying to think, this isn't the Frick, this isn't, or Waddesdon. It's not a place where I could just sort of put things down. I had to find a way of being in alignment with the family, both Moïse and the children and the grandchildren. And so, in fact, what I did, with your blessing, was I started to write into porcelain, and I wrote letters. I wrote letters into porcelain, and then I put these porcelain letters, down on Moïse's desks where he'd written things. It's some grand spaces and some less grand spaces. But then also I found it was all the other spaces that were the hidden the hidden spaces of the house where people had worked for the family. And so I made a series of then that there's no more horrible word than installation. Intervention's pretty bad. But I made these things, which actually I still love, actually, using oak and porcelain, and put them down in different places so you could see them just glancingly. And they were just very simple bowls and objects. And this was sort of talking again to this feeling that Moïse had animated all this space for himself and for the visitors. And I wanted to do that in a personal, so I was talking to him. And then in some spaces I made more particular installations. This was in Nissim's bedroom, which is a piece of lead wrapped around some black porcelain. And then, this is a house filled with porcelain. I opened up this extraordinary Sèvres inlaid cabinet. And this is me at my most annoying. I opened a drawer. I made a porcelain box. I broke up porcelain gilded shards. I broke up a letter and just left it there in the. You could hardly see it. But it was there. It was sort of talking brokenness back into the house, and then high up in the house, in some of the attic-y spaces, just finding empty spaces, and then letting them occupy the shadows. Up there, this is the place where Olivier leapt out of the window onto the balustrade. I have a great fondness for this particular room. But just making objects and putting them into cupboards and letting them be in space. This is the point. Not everything has to be seen to have value. Not everything has to be nailed down and curated and under bright lights and archived to have a presence. And this house is full of shadows. It's full of things. So simply by doing that, I'm talking back into the family and talking back into the ongoing complex life of the place,
which was quite, important, because as Edmund just said, it was the first time. It's perhaps the last time, as I say. But it's complex to invite an artist to a place like this. Happily for me, you knew everything about the story of the house. You, in a way, experienced the place very profoundly and deeply. So I did not need to remind you cannot move this or that because of the will. And as a director, I was very very strict on respecting the wheel. You know, there is always a moment where people are fed up with respecting wheels and say, okay, we could do that like this, who cares? And I think that we are here for that. Who cares? The dead souls cares, and we are here for that. And I have to say that, and it's more in the perspective of contemporary art, and like you, I hate the word installation. That was also very important for me to know that when you invite an artist, it's to give him freedom. If you invite an artist to start saying, you don't do that, I want to do that, you know, you're not a teenager, you're an artist. So it was very profound and very, very important also to know that your exhibition, your works all around the house, either in the public spaces, either in the domestic places, were never an obstacle for people coming to the house for the first time or for the only time in their life, which can sometimes happen with contemporary art. You go to Versailles and boom, you have a huge installation in front of whatever, and you say, that's my only time in my life I'm here, and I love Anish Kapoor, but I saw a big Anish Kapoor in the Queen's bedroom, and that's it. And I think that was also very important, because as you say, it's a special place and a special house. And we had this feedback from the visitors. Many of them came because of the exhibition, which was very important too, renewing to the experience of the place. But some people came because they wanted to visit the place without knowing there was an exhibition. And we had the feedback through the people in charge of the house, that the fact that people were very grateful to be able to experience an exhibition which was so respectful and deeply tied to the place. And I think that's important to mention, because sometimes contemporary art is very much about ego and not about the humility of the direct relationship with a place or another world.
Just entre nous. My absolute dream is to have an exhibition where no one can find the art. For me, that would be the most perfect kind of moment of then I'm happy. But seriously, I mean, this street in Paris is a really complicated part of a really complicated and unsorted out part of French history and family history. You know, it isn't finished. That's why it's so powerful. And so to work in these spaces, you know, one of the things I wanted to do was to provide a place to pause, you know, and that's, you know, and which is when I said that I was for the first time going to use stone, you didn't blink, bless you, Olivier Gabet, because I actually made a series of benches, these stone benches to sit outside the Musée Camondo where people could sit. And they did sit. And here they were. They're made out of a beautiful Haunton stone. It's the beautiful stone that Henry Moore loved so much. And they were sort of worn away. And there was complete joy for me, because on the edges of these benches, there was just one or two little moments of gold, a sort of kintsugi moment, which people could find or not find, a sort of moment of showing that something had been damaged and something had been, and that I knew that had happened. So, but one of my great moments of my life, apart from marriage and children, I have both child and wife in the audience, was actually at the end of the vernissage. At the end of the vernissage, was looking back as we went out into the Rue de Monceau, and all the lights of the house were on, right up into the attics, and there was children were jumping from bench to bench to bench, and it was full of noise, and it was just like, this is, you know, this works. This is why you do it. This is why you do it. And you can't legislate ever for it something, having that synapse of energy where someone connects to something else and you find a child jumping on your art and you're happy. Good. Yeah.
I have to say that after the exhibition, you very generously offered to the museum several works from the exhibition. And it was my last public and function and decision as a director. And I remember I had the board of acquisition and the board of trustees that, of course, it was not given to the Musée Nissim de Camondo because this collection cannot change, move, be enriched, but given to the Musée d'Art Décoratif. But it would be fantastic. It would be good to keep in the house, whatever, whoever. And right now it's under restoration and renovation, but I hope that they respect very much the will. I will respect just my wish and your wish. Perhaps there is a last picture.
A very last picture, just simply because my father is in the audience tonight, and he grew up in Paris. And so a final, this is incredibly sentimental of me, but I'm a chevalier and I can do what the hell I like. So here is my father, aged 3, in Paris, wearing about the trendiest coat you could possibly imagine. So this, my father, this is 92, yes, I can see you, 92 and a half years ago is you, well dressed by your mother, walking down a Parisian street. And it's very nice that you're here to see this particular circle of Parisian family life this evening.
Thank you.
Is that a good grace note on which
I think it's a fantastic conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Olivier.
Je regarde Isabelle. 5 minutes of question. Regardez. Oui, il y en a une question au premier rang.
There may be no questions. No, there is one question. Good. Hooray.
Hello? Yes. Do you feel there's further conversations to have with the Camondos?
A wonderful, complicated first question to have. Are there further conversations to have with the Camondos? Yes. Not just the Camondos, but also this extraordinary family, the Reinach family, who's in the middle of the Camondo family and our family, the Frussi family. This extraordinary, brilliant, questioning, complex Jewish family at the heart of French culture at the turn of the century. You know, part of the Dreyfus Affair, part of collecting the writing of jurisprudence, the building of buildings, curators. And I've just been told last week that there's an now known cache of letters that have been discovered in Florence. Yes, extraordinary. Salomon Reinach, 260 letters to Bernard Berenson.
Wow.
So
Bernard Berenson.
Yes, but actually, a more proper answer to that is that as I get older, I realise that actually nothing stops, genuinely. And actually, I kind of try and write about that in this book, actually, which says that, you know, you think something's been restituted, but it's still live as an issue. You think that there's been closure because you've done an exhibition or you've done a book, but actually it hasn't. There is no closure, and the liveness of the liveness of all these stories is something that I hold to be an absolute truth. And actually, so I do come back, and I suspect I'm probably, you know, that's just the way it happens. That's just it.
Another question.
Hello, Pippa.
Thank you for absolutely riveting conversation. I wondered if we could bring you back across the English Channel, Edmund, to 19 Princelet Street, which I think you visited very recently. And I wondered how that extraordinary house might start a conversation. Some letters.
So Tessa, who's an old colleague and friend of mine from way, way back, a great scholar, is asking, again, a very complicated question, which is that on Friday I walked through a door in Spitalfields into an early 18th century Huguenot house, a house that had been full of silk weavers, where a great 19th century synagogue had been built over into the garden, and the house is untouched. The synagogue is full of dust. And there was an invitation. I'm like Olivier, I'm a fan of Instagram. And I shared a couple of images of this on Friday in a state of hugely moved by this place. Yes, I think is probably the answer to your 3 questions. But then if you move me through any door and I find dust, I seem to end up writing a book. So, you know,
Plenty.
So yes.
Perhaps the last question. No.
No,
France
is terrible. Am I allowed to say thank you?
Of course.
Thank you so profoundly for coming tonight. Thank you for the award of this, which has fallen off and is in my pocket. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight. Thank you, dear Olivier. Please, many more ahead of us. But thank you so much. Thank you for coming.